Okay, welcome everyone to our Planning and Heritage Committee meeting, Thursday, May 16th. I apologize for starting a little late. I'll have a call to order, please. Any declarations today of conflicts? Seeing none, and approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Beck. Thank you very much. An adoption of the minutes from our Tuesday, May 7th meeting. Okay, moved by Councillor McCabe and seconded by Councillor Beck. Is there any business arising from those minutes?
Madam Chair, just again, I'm
Yes.
keeping this on the, and I spoke to our CAO this morning regarding the variances on the outreach, the Provincial Community Outreach Wellness Center, and also the variance on the emergency, temporary emergency shelter. The clock is ticking. I know we did receive a draft of terms of reference from Deputy Minister Jamie McDonald from the Department of Housing, Land Use and Municipalities, and we're looking that over, and we'll get that back to him. So we may have to look at getting another meeting soon, but you know, it's going to be here before you know it, December, and we have to know where they're going with it, because, and Donna, I'm not putting the pressure, Madam Chair, on Donna, but I think we, as a political entity, have to put that pressure on to say, what are you going to do? What's the long-term plan? So I'll keep bringing it up under business rise, because it's going to catch up to us.
And the other thing that was brought up at the council meeting on Tuesday evening was just for the next committee meeting, back from the minutes, we had some discussion on this at our last meeting of Planning and Heritage, in terms of the outreach and the Outreach Wellness Center, is people were asking about the development agreement that went with it, and wanted an update if all of the items had been adhered to. And specifically, there was a lot of talk around an update on the 6 police officers and whether or not that comes in conjunction with our protective services or not, just to follow up just from our Tuesday evening monthly meeting of council. Okay, so that was the business arising from the minutes. Now we can move on to our reports and discussions, and I can turn that over to Donna. And we are going to be discussing from our last meeting, continuing the discussion on the enforcement and summary proceedings bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So at our last committee meeting, we went a little bit into this discussion around the updated version of the enforcement and summary proceedings bylaw. There were some questions asked, and our solicitor is here today to continue that discussion, just in case committee members want to ask any questions or have any concerns.
Thank you very much for Donna for that. And I think we'll keep it really informal. Anyone that wants to ask questions to either Donna or to our solicitor, just bypass me and go right directly there to ensure that we're all getting the questions asked and answered. Just if we can wait our turns is all. But turn the mic on so if any folks are listening can hear. So I'll just open it up to anyone that wants to ask some questions.
I'll start. Again, Melanie, just going back to that bicycle helmets. I know it's in the Traffic Act, correct? But can we not put it in our summary proceedings bylaw? And if it can't be weaker than the Act, so it has to be either the same or stronger. Is that asking too much, or is it just, it's unnecessary?
So are you speaking in specific reference to helmets? I think that's what you brought up at the last meeting.
Correct.
So I did look, and it is covered in the Highway Traffic Act. It specifically says that you can't ride a bicycle or a motorcycle or other type of vehicle, that type of vehicle without a helmet. The question as to whether we can add it into the enforcement and summary proceedings bylaw or the traffic bylaw is a jurisdiction type question. So we can certainly canvass I can have someone or myself can look into it at our office to see if we want to add it directly. There's no reference to helmets in your traffic bylaw.
No, I know that.
And so if council wants to have it added into the traffic bylaw, we can look into it. I just need to ensure that we're not encroaching on provincial jurisdiction.
So Melanie, in the Traffic Act, if I get pulled over by our police or the RCMP, there's a minimum fine and a maximum fine, right?
That's my understanding.
Right. So does that go to provincial coffers or does that go to the city coffers?
I don't know the answer to
Okay,
that.
so I think that's the question that if that could be looked into, because I think if it's in our act or it's in our bylaw, the ticket will come from us. Well, it will come from us anyways, but it'll have to be collected by the province if it's under the Traffic Act. The other thing too I wanted to ask, so, and I think, Madam Chair, we did get into this scenario the last time. So if our, well, police officers can enforce the bylaws, we just don't need a zoning, we don't need just Todd Sutcliffe and his assistant. So if the bylaw enforcement officer or police officer goes to a dilapidated, unsightly, dangerous, hazardous building structure, can he or she just give the ticket to say, you've not heeded to the warning, here's your ticket, instead of coming back to council to vote on whether we go in and clean it up or, and then bill them later, send a bill to the homeowner later on?
So I don't have that bylaw in front of me, so I don't know exactly what the process is and what's required of council and when. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because I've been at council before where those motions have come before you. So I can look into that. I expect that the answer is that it is expressly stated that council does need to approve any, needs to pass a motion to give direction to staff to issue that ticket, just based on the fact that the city has been doing that. So if the desire is to remove that extra step, it will likely need to be a bylaw amendment to that specific bylaw.
And the reason I'm asking, I don't think in other jurisdictions, and maybe Mike Morris could add something, or a CAO coming from two different municipalities, but I'm sure that other municipalities have this issue of unsightly, hazardous, dangerous properties that have to be followed up through, cleanup or whatever. But I can understand that if my rationale that it was coming back to council, Melanie, was that it was a property issue, and someone in an enforcement role, such as a police officer or a bylaw enforcement officer, doesn't have that jurisdictional power. That has to come from a motion or resolution of council, sort of a legislative requirement. Is that something could I ask you to look at other jurisdictions, how they handle it?
Absolutely.
Like, if we're going down this road, let's do it right in the first, and I'm sure we'll get other amendments thereafter, but let's get a nice tight package so that, I know, Madam Chair, you've heard it many times, why can't we speed up this process? Why does it have to come back to council? Why does it allow 18 months, gives it 18 months? I think there was one at the last regular monthly meeting, maybe in May or April, where it was 18 months, but it was back on our table within that 18 months. So just those are a couple of questions I have.
And just to clarify, Your Worship, are you specifically talking about the situations where it comes to council for a motion to have the city clean up? Or are you
Correct.
talking about more of the demolition of those properties? 'Cause
No,
they're two
clean up,
separate.
not the
Clean up,
demolition is a whole different issue. I understand that. It's going there and the officer or the bylaw
Sure.
enforcement officer says, here's a ticket.
Understood.
Minimum 150, maximum 300. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm going to jump in and piggyback on that if I can, because it's kind of in line of these unsightlies. When we received an email on May 5th or May 9th, I guess, from Scott Adams, who's the manager of Public Works, talking about the work that's being done between the levels of government on garbage, for example. We have lots of properties that have garbage. Waste Watch refuses to pick them up. Then we have overflow of garbage in properties within the city. Then we have rodents. Then we have, it's an ongoing issue, but it's a real multi-level, and not a whole lot of jurisdiction. A bylaw will go in, he'll ask Public Works to go clean it, they'll put a fine on the property owner, which never really gets recouped because of how it works. So I know they've done a lot of work collaboratively within the Waste Watch, Department of Health, and the city. And I think, we all received the email, I believe, and there's like a 5-step process. The city receives a complaint about unsightly, he'll go out and initiate what we have in place. If it's unsuccessful, the bylaw will initiate to have city staff clean up the property. The manager will issue a joint letter between all the departments, to Public Health, Waste Management, and City, when step 2 is initiated to the property owner, reminding them of the legal obligations, blah, blah, blah. When that fails, the manager will work with Public Health to visit the site, look at the health concerns. And when that fails, because this is what we have, when this fails, when this fails, when this fails, and we always think it's just easy to give a fine, but basically, even at this point, if step 3 was unsuccessful, the manager of Public Works and the bylaw officer will then work with Public Health to determine if a fine can be levied against the property owner for failure to correct the public health violation. So even after all of this, there's no clear direction for these fines that we're trying to be able to put in place. So, and that's between 3 levels of government trying to come together and work for people that don't know how to sort garbage. So I think this is going to be, it's not just black and white like we maybe thought originally. And I know Councillor Beck has more to add, but there's an example of where it's just not clear.
Confirm whether or not we were able to piggyback off of, for example, if I have, $3,000 of unpaid parking tickets, and then I come in and I apply for a permit to put in a patio, I have to cover off one thing before I can get the other. We had some discussion on that, and we weren't really sure whether or not we could piggyback. Were you able to get that information?
So that specific section in the Municipal Government Act hasn't been tested in the court, and that's not a surprise. PEI doesn't have a plethora of case law, and so we can certainly look into it in other jurisdictions to see if there is a similar provision. I expect that the answer that we will come up to is the fine has to be related to what type of permit is being sought in order for the city to be able to refuse to issue it. So I think I used this example last time. The first thing that comes to mind is a short-term rental bylaw, licensing bylaw, and if someone hasn't paid their fine or their fee or a fine related to that bylaw, then the city may be able to invoke the use of that section in the Municipal Government Act and refuse to issue the license for the next year.
Right. And so then if we were to build on that, then if I was applying to get a permit for an outbuilding in my backyard, and I had put in a patio without a permit, and I still haven't paid the fine for that, before I can get that next permit, I have to cover that fine because it's all under the same kind of stuff?
That's what I expect. I mean, there could definitely be an argument that they are 2 different matters because it's an outbuilding and a deck, but it would technically both be under the zoning and development bylaw. And this particular provision may also be one of those situations where we have to test it. And, as much research as we can do in other jurisdictions to see if they have a similar provision and if that's been tested in their provincial or Supreme Court levels, it's unique. The actual provision in the Municipal Government Act is unique to PEI, and it just may be a situation where we have to go with the test case and see what the result is.
I think the last week or 2 weeks ago, the mayor had talked about, how did you word that? And it was around complaint-driven offenses. But things don't have to be just complaint-driven, right? The bylaw enforcement officers or the police themselves, if they see somebody and a dog is running wild and they don't have them on a leash and they stop and they say, oh, can we see your dog license? And they see you don't have a dog license and they're not on a leash. There's been no complaint, they just happened to witness it. So they can issue the ticket.
There's nothing in the Municipal Government Act or the bylaw that prohibits the city from proactively enforcing their bylaw. The complaint-driven basis of our bylaw and of every other bylaw in every other municipality in this province is purely, from my perspective, an administrative and personnel matter, that the city does not employ tens and tens of people to peruse the streets of Charlottetown to ensure every single bylaw is followed.
I just want to go back to the email that Scott sent out, and it was kind of, I got to admit, I read it rather quickly because I was trying to, during when my brother was in the hospital and whatnot, but it seemed to me that it's an encumbered process. And I don't really see a whole lot of change with this process. It's still a lot of, we got to talk to this person, this organization, that organization. And I think that a lot of it comes back to we have to change our bylaw and put the wording in there in order for it to be, because right now we're bound by a whole bunch of steps that are still in that new process that Scott is putting out. And that seems to be again, I say this without having spent a whole lot of time looking at it, but it just seems to me that we're no further ahead with what we're trying to accomplish because of these new guidelines or parameters. It still seems that we're still very clunky. And I think that's what we've collectively been trying to achieve, is to try and remove that and make it more fluid and quick and efficient and shorten up the timelines on it. Anyway, again, I just want to make that comment. That was my first impression after having read it, that we don't seem to be that much further ahead.
I think it's when we get into different levels of government and who's accountable for what, too. So you have Waste Watch, who's technically an independent with the province, though, right? That's right. So that's, where Department of Health had to get involved in order to be able to do anything. We don't have the jurisdiction as the city to go in and tell the Waste Watch Corporation that they have to follow our bylaw. Like, you know what I mean? They have their own regulation, and it's kind of trumped by the province. So this is where it gets really challenging, is that you have different levels. And where do our bylaws fit with that? It's like the Planning Act. I mean, that's separate from than what our bylaws and stuff within planning. We still trumped by the provincial, is that correct, Eleanor, that we're trumped kind of by the provincial planning legislation? It's a little different than just municipal?
Yes, ultimately.
Right, and it's similar with like Waste Watch. They would be under the province, which, do they have to? We don't tell them what to do in our municipality, according to our bylaws. They have their own rules, do they not?
In terms of the waste pickup, but we do, with the bylaw itself, in terms of cleaning up.
Yes,
We have controls that way.
Yeah, that's
kind of,
We can't,
kind of, because if they don't clean it up if it's not done right. And then we have to come in and clean it up. So we have rules, but if people don't follow them, we don't have a lot of, other than Todd goes in and follows the process that's laid out, but
And I don't think, from the city's perspective, like the city couldn't mandate that Waste Watch gets cleaned up by them. Like if the city wants to do it, it's a city initiative.
right.
And so you do have your own standards, but it's the city that has to adhere to those standards.
Right,
Well, residents, but then as a result of residents
Right.
not, then the city has to come in.
but it would be, yeah, I just, it is confusing.
Well, and I think the part is control what we can control. Like, there are some elements that are beyond our control, but there are still elements in there that we can make a determination as to how we would like them to proceed, and I think that's what I'd like to see. That's what I'd like to see happening.
Well, Councillor Beck, the corporation came into place about 1999, 2000. Prior to that, it was always the city that cleaned up garbage, picked up garbage through a contractor, Superior Sanitation. But now with the corporation, IW, Island Waste Management Corporation, they have at least three deputy ministers that sit on that corporation, and they have resident members. And, yeah, this bylaw, any bylaw that we put in place, Councillor Julie, is not going to take care of everything. I just think we've been talking so much about this summary proceedings bylaw that, we're coming down to where we're going to have something in place. And you know what? It'll have to be, it'll be amendable. Like, we'll have to change with the times. But I think IWMC, as chair, Councillor McCabe, should maybe reach out to the CEO of IWMC and have him or her, I think it's
It's a she, and we have met.
And yeah.
With the minister as well. for the
come
province.
into the committee and meet with the committee.
That's where this all came from, was that initial meeting happened, and then from there, Scott and Waste Watch, Department of Health continued the journey to try and figure out a potential solution for,
So I think your meeting was just a private meeting that took place.
to say we need to do something.
Yeah, my suggestion is that you bring the CEO in from IWMC to a standing committee of Public Works, and it becomes public record that, look, we have to work together here. This is, we are the largest municipality, and if you look at the customer base, the largest customer base is right in the Charlottetown area. So we have to start working together, and how we work together is that we have a bylaw in place, and if they don't do the cleanup, we do the cleanup, and maybe we build them. There's a couple of things that we can do, but
Bill who, Island Waste Watch?
look,
Their job and their mandate is to ensure that we sort
Right.
garbage, and we, protect our lands, and they're not going to allow, I don't think that would be part of their regulation.
Well,
We're gonna bill them
uh,
for not picking up garbage.
I know going down some streets where waste has been rejected, and it's all over the street, so whose responsibility is that? Is it the apartment building owner? Yes. Is it the resident that owns the home? Yes. So then we go back to them, but again, IWMC has to work with us because we are a big customer base of IWMC, and we talked about this at Shape Stratford. It's about collaboration, cooperation, working together. It doesn't have to be just between different levels of government. It can be between organizations that are part of the community. And IWMC is a very important part of that, because I just got my tax bill. It's now $210 a year for IWMC fee. And that fee is paid by every landowner on Prince Edward Island. So again, I think that there should be a public record, bring them into the committee level, have a discussion, and let's find out what we can do working with them. But what I have here in front of me, Melanie, I think it's great. It's just a little more, I think we're looking at some more tweaking, and then we can put it through the legislative process here at City Council and get it in place. That's great news. Thank you.
There's a 3.11A.
What
You're-
page?
It's on page 34.
Okay.
You're going to get a ticket for moving a building with a permit. So I think it must be supposed to be without a permit. I'm thinking. Yeah,
Is it 3.4A?
3.11A, moving a building with a permit.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So the amounts that have been, that are placed here for first and second offenses, are these existing prices we've already had, or are these prices based on jurisdictional scan, or are these always been the prices?
Are you referencing the unsightly premises bylaw or in Schedule B in the enforcement bylaw?
I am in the enforcement summary proceedings.
So
Yeah.
these, there is currently a schedule to the summary proceedings bylaw that is currently enforced by the city. And so it really hasn't changed that much. However, the amounts have changed. And my colleague Jacob met, I think, with most, if not all, department heads, or had the discussion and got these numbers from the department heads. And so that would likely be a combination of what has been done in the past, what has been effective in the past, and a jurisdictional scan of what's reasonable.
When this eventually goes to council, are we able to get the, what do they call it, the redlined version of what the offense ticketing used to be compared to what it is now?
Yes, I think we can do that. This, it says version 11 on the bottom, but this is actually version 15. So it'll be significantly different, but I'll see what our computer can do.
Okay. Go ahead, Counselor Beck.
Just with regards to the Schedule A, I did have a couple of questions. The schedule, are these all, is this all a paper process, or is it a electronic or paper process? Can it be both, or is it one or the other?
My understanding currently is that it is entirely a paper process. I think you can pay parking meter tickets online. I'm not sure if that extends to anything else. But that would definitely be an internal decision for the city, and it wouldn't, there's nothing in the MGA that would prohibit this process from becoming electronic.
Okay. And on page 23, I had a question about, it was more on the complaint process. 11.10 on page 23, where the CA, so this is going through the steps of the complaints against the bylaw officer. And it says where the CAO determines that the complaint is merit, set a date and a time for hearing to be conducted by a hearing committee of no less than 3 members whom shall be appointed by the CAO. What sort of people are we looking at for that type of disciplinary hearing? Like, is the way it's written, it could be conceivably anybody. Doesn't have to be anyone with any relevant skills or understanding, or like, it just seems to me a little vague. And I don't know if or how it could be clarified, or any kind of, because right now, if I look at that, it just could be, Eleanor could walk down the street, pick 3 people off the street and say, come on to a hearing. Yeah, sure, I got nothing to do, let's go. I'll do that. And of course, I'm being facetious, but conceivably, if you look at the bylaw, it says all she has to do is get 3 people to come. Doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter what their experience is, doesn't matter anything. I don't know if or how that could be, like, is it 3 professional staff? Is it a combination of professional staff, counselors? Who might fall into that committee? I mean, it's not apt to get there, but very often, but it could. Maybe Eleanor or Melanie or somebody could provide an answer to that.
So this is the minimum standard that's set by the Municipal Government Act. And so if the city wants to make, I'll use the word restrictive, even though that doesn't really define what Eleanor would be doing. But if we want to put, if the city wishes to put parameters on who those individuals are, I don't see anything prohibiting the city from doing that. But it would have to be in the bylaw if we want to kind of put guidelines for the CAO as to who she can choose. So that can be one of any things. It can be staff. It could be volunteer members of committees, volunteer members of the applicable committee.
Could it be something that would have recommended by the CAO and approved by council? Like, would it be taken through to a committee for approval, just to sort of say, yeah, it makes sense that these people would be on that committee? Again, I'm just throwing out a thought here. Don?
Yeah, so I'm thinking it could be something that's similar to what we do now for the design review roster. And then we will include a definition in the definition section of the bylaw to state what that hearing committee is and who sits on that.
Sure.
Madam Chair, Can I just ask, Melanie, so I've just went onto our website for our current summary proceedings bylaw, and the last time it was amended was 1996. So if I look at the schedule of fines, I can see why you had to update them. But there is one there that I looked at with interest, and it says, dangerous, hazardous, and unsightly bylaw, issuing of notice. Minimum fine, $100, maximum fine, $500. I don't know if we've been ever doing that. And with the summary proceedings bylaw that's on our website, that was last amended in 1996, it's got a ticket, everything's there. So, with this, what you're proposing, we're gonna take this last amended bylaw 1996, put that in the round file and put the new one in here. Is that what, are you gonna integrate the new one with this, the existing one, or just replace it?
So the one that's before you as the new enforcement and summary proceedings bylaw started as the current one in place in the city was version 1. That's what we started with. We are now on several versions later that have been amended, but like I said in the very beginning in the meeting last week, the substantive process behind bylaw enforcement hasn't changed. We're handcuffed by what is outlined in the Municipal Government Act, and so we've updated the current bylaw or the proposed amended bylaw to reflect the changes in the Municipal Government Act, and then we've moved things around, and we've tried to make it as clear as possible, because when you read the current summary proceedings bylaw, in my opinion, it doesn't flow, right? It's really jumpy. You have to check this section and this section and this section. So that's the starting point. That's what we started with, the 1996 bylaw.
Yeah.
And that's what we always do when we amend a bylaw or look to create a brand new bylaw, is we start from what we have.
Right. So what I'm looking at, the last time this was amended was 1996. They probably looked at it and said, look, we're not touching that anymore. And here we are, 2024, and we're going through a whole new version. So could I just ask, just to clarify, Donna or Melanie, when this is passed, second reading, we'll have tickets printed up. They'll go with their police office. Is it a separate ticket than what is currently? No, it's the same ticket, right?
There's been small amendments to the ticket for sure, but substantively it's the same.
Great, okay, so, Donna, so what I'm looking at is that we can start using enforcement to cut down on some of these bylaw breakers and, start seeing if it works. Test it, as Melanie said, we're going to have to test some parts of this bylaw through court challenges or anything else that may come up.
Yes, Your Worship. So the bylaw that you're looking at on your screen actually became effective in 1996. It was last updated in 2009. But the fees that are listed here, you'll see in Schedule B that we've added a few because we now cover more of the city's bylaws than was originally covered in the version that you're looking at on your screen. And also that this updated version is intended to repeal the one that was effective in 1996 and updated last in 2009.
Summary proceedings bylaw, this is off our website, effective August 12, 1996, amended October 17, 2002, and amended March 9th, 2009. But I don't think the fees, I don't think the Schedule B were changed. I think that has remained the same since its first inception. Am I right or wrong?
You're correct, but currently the one that we're proposing has some new fees as well as some new bylaws with corresponding fees.
Yeah, because I go down to the last page, summary proceedings bylaw, changes that were made, first reading 96, second reading August 12th, 96, and that's Yeah. Well, okay, anyways, we're,
And there's a lot in here that need to be looked at still when I'm
well, I
going
think that's,
through,
if you look
like
at, if you look at the new schedule, Schedule B.
Kennel license and failing to pay for your dog license, I'd be really interested to see how much money we collect in dog license fees.
Yeah.
I know, but I think because you want to be a rule follower, but I don't even think people would think that we have a dog licensing fee.
You didn't know that?
No, and
I know about it.
probably
Never get caught yet because we don't have a dog.
failure to wear a
So
condom.
is there any data, maybe this is a complete sidebar, but is there any data on, since 1996, or even since this has been amended in 2009, have any tickets have actually ever been issued?
Plenty of tickets have been issued. Our office has been involved in issuing tickets, and we've taken matters to provincial court to enforce them. Collection, obviously, is another matter, and I don't have the numbers on those. I don't have the specific numbers on issuing tickets, but, you know, I've worked closely with Todd Sutcliffe, and that is primarily what his role is at the police department. Now, I know he works at the police department and doesn't always cover all of the bylaws, because that's a big job. But tickets have definitely been issued.
But it's not just Officer Sutcliffe that can do this. It's the, well, how many police officers do we have employed in the city of Charlottetown?
67, yeah, 11.
Yeah, so we've got 67 police officers and 2 bylaw enforcement officers. So it's not just Officer Sutcliffe that can issue these tickets, is that correct?
Correct. And I just want to be clear, the current summary proceedings bylaw, the way that tickets and laying in information takes place is not changing with this new bylaw. The city currently has the power to do what we are also going to propose to do in this bylaw. It's just to clean up the process and clarify it and simplify it as much as we can within the confines of the Municipal Government Act. So we aren't completely reinventing the wheel here. It's a very similar process. It's the exact same process as to what currently exists and what is provided for in probably every other municipality that has an enforcement bylaw and PEI. The bylaw needed to be updated, and so that's what we did.
So sorry, Councilor McCabe. So I'm imagining through the jigs and the reels, once we get up to whatever version, we're on version 15 now, whenever it's completed and ready for council's review, there must be going to be a huge educational piece for the community, is there? Because, you know, as Councilor McCabe pointed out, I wonder how many folks even know that you're supposed to license your dog. So I'm just like, is that kind of the steps down the road, an educational piece about this new bylaw? And I'm not looking at you, Melanie, I'm looking more at Donna on that one, or Mike.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. So with every new policy that we implement or we intend to implement, we do have a comms piece that goes along with it. So yes, that will be included.
I think,
I need to say though, you need to go back and look at this. Like, who is going to enforce failure to remove dog deficit? Now, I'm sorry, but we're talking about huge garbage issues and people with no fences around swimming pools, life-saving concerns. And in our bylaw, it says you can have a fine for $150 if you don't pick up, and I get it, you can if you see somebody and, but I just know it's not realistic. So I think we need to look at what might be realistic in this.
well, and I think that's why I was asking about the warning option last time, because I'm with you, there's a lot of stuff in there. No, but seriously. No, but seriously, I mean, but you could be in a situation where someone is technically faced with a fine. You say, really? I had no idea. And when I was looking through these contraventions, I was saying, really, we do have that? So, but that's Melanie is going to actually, they're going to be looking at that to see whether that is an option. I know that was, I brought that up at the last meeting and might get an answer, but maybe that's something that if you're actually forced to deal with something, it could be an option that, okay, we'll put it in, and at least that's an educational piece. You can do all the comms, but who's going to read it? But when you're faced with it personally, it might make a little bit of a different situation. So anyway, it's like a lot of the laws, people wouldn't know there's a lot of laws that exist that we're not faced with until you're actually hit with them face to face.
So Councillor McCabe, if you look at the current one, nuisance bylaw, failure disobeying the Halloween curfew. Get rid of that too.
I just saw that.
So, yeah, look,
I got it, shut my.
yeah, you know, it's there, but I think the important ones that we're looking at are the planning and development bylaws that are being, that are not,
If it's all included and we're saying that this is a rule, we, so. I think it needs to be. I'm sorry, it's inappropriate. I know I'm trying not to, but it should be updated. Excuse me.
looks good like that, we can move on. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Guys, it's not even funny, but it is. Okay, so are there any other questions for now? And what are our next steps?
The timeline we're looking at is, Melanie, could it be 30, 60, 90 days? What do you think?
So I have a couple of questions to look into from this meeting, which shouldn't take too long, or I don't expect they'll take too long, and I'll certainly notify council if I'm wrong on that. And then a couple of small amendments may result from looking into that. I don't expect, we're in the middle of May. I guess it has to come back to committee and then go to council. So I'll work with Donna, possibly the June meeting, maybe July. But her and I will work together to get it
Thank
before
you.
council.
Thank you.
So will
you.
this come back to this committee again with the updated changes before, okay, okay. And likely when it is ready to go to council, they're probably going to want to have it for a few weeks because it's, it's a pretty lengthy bylaw, yeah, so. Anyways, I do apologize for laughing, some of them are just kind of cute and kind of silly. Yeah, a little bit. Anywho, okay. Agenda, and I had just asked to put on the agenda, just a discussion that maybe giving staff a little bit of direction on maybe looking into this for us, and that would be our ability to waive permit fees for organizations or folks that are working with with our unhoused or around poverty issues or food insecurities, and I don't really know what that would look like. I don't know if other municipalities are doing it or not, but I just thought maybe this could be something, if the committee is interested in having the staff take a little look-see and see what other municipalities are doing in terms of permit fees when it comes to special interest groups and whether or not they are addressing some of the priorities of the municipality in a positive way. So just open that up to any thoughts before we.
Madam Chair, look, I see this as a noble cause. I know there are many organizations out there, but when we brought in the affordable housing tax incentive, the first policy, as you remember, was 20 years, no taxes at all, and then, I think we made a mistake here. So one did get past that threshold. Now it's a 10-year sliding scale, and we don't charge the full permit. fee for the affordable housing project, it's 50%. So we're already in the on-house, but I think when you talk about NGOs that are doing something that, like the situation we're talking about regarding the community fridge in Connolly Street, I think these are, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, these are one-offs that we see maybe one in every 10 years. So I'd like to just try to deal with this one-off, one-on-one, just to say, look, maybe we can pass a resolution at finance, or we can bring it up to council. You know the volunteers involved with and you've attended their monthly meetings. I've attended the community fridge monthly meetings. They're dedicated volunteers. They're there because of food insecurity, and as was said several times, it's more about the food insecurity for our kids. That's the group that's being affected the most, that go to school with no breakfast. And I know there's a breakfast program, I know there's a lunch program, but there's still the rest of the day, because they're only in school for 5 years. There's that day and night. So I'm in full agreement with you, Madam Chair, that we have to do something. How we do it, I think if we make a blanket policy, I don't know where that'll take us, but I'm open for discussion, and I'm glad you bring it up.
So perhaps even an evaluation process or an application for user groups to be able to apply and plead their case, for lack of a better term. I know that Director Mike and I had a brief discussion on this, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but you might have other approaches on how we could do this. But by all means, I'm not asking you to speak of it today if you're not ready to.
Yeah, I guess further to that conversation, there's a couple things we could look at dealing with it ad hoc, like what's being suggested here today through a grant or some other tool. Alternatively, staff could take the advice and direction of this committee to bring a report back at some point with a municipal scan on approaches across the country. I know in the bigger picture, dealing with housing and everything else, municipalities are taking a very broad look at what they can do to incentivize and reduce some of the barriers for development overall. I guess ownership situation, or if we're dealing with a nonprofit group or community group, that's another consideration that we could examine.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Bowden.
Yeah, again, I'm coming in a little bit of this after the fact, but I think the problem, like if we got in a bit of a pickle here because this was started as a pilot project, correct? And it did not fall under the proper zoning because it was under a parking lot zoning or something like that, and that's where we get into, that's where the complaint emanated from. Am I understanding that correctly?
So this group was given permission, and we're told that they did not require a permit.
Right.
And yes, there was language around, we don't see that you need a permit for this type of use on this parking lot, so we'll pilot it for now. But
Okay.
there was no longevity and length time around. That was just the language that was used. So now we kind of Quentin Tarantino it, and we're ahead of time now, and we look back, and in fact, it should have been a site exemption, and that didn't occur.
Yeah.
So now we are stuck with an organization that if council approves the site-specific exemption, they have a $3,500 amount of fees to pay.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to figure out, like, this might not be the one-off. These things might happen again. So is there something that we could do to be prepared in the future, better prepared for taking something like this to council to see whether or not council would waive the fees?
Right, so I I guess going back to, I don't think we can treat them in a one-off manner. I think we have to have something within our powers and our bylaws and our policies, whatever it might be, to say, we have the, council does have the ability to waive. And I believe that this is something that we should be looking at. So, but in order to do that, we have to have something to hook back to. And if we have something to hook back to, then we can say, you know what, let's look at this further. If we don't have that there for that hook, we're no different than what we are right now with this parking, going back into try and figure out how we're going to work something that was well-intended, done under good intentions, but because someone or some people, I'm not sure exactly who, lodged a complaint, we had to deal with it. So if you have that ability within there to address it on as just saying, okay, well, let's just deal with this because we think we should. We now have a legislative guideline or a parameter within which to work. So therefore, it gives us a little bit more solid case building, I guess, as to whether we decide that we want to pursue it. And again, I believe, I'm so grateful for the work that For Love, For Care has done, and I think we have to support groups like them and the great work that the Sunils and others are doing to help keep that going. So anyway, I think coming back, we just have to be able to beef up our side of things in order to allow us to do that work more effectively.
Thank you, Councillor Buck. So really then, circling back to what Mike suggested, is that's probably the direction this committee should probably give, and that is for staff to have a look at, jurisdictionally, what other municipalities are doing, et cetera, what he had mentioned. Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
No, I was just saying I agree with that. And I think these groups we know are doing work with no funding. It's not nonprofit, it's no money. So we really have to, and that takes that down further. There's not many volunteer groups trying to do greater good for these vulnerable people or populations or areas for nothing. So that can be even where you would break it down even more. I would see that.
Yeah, because other groups, you think about the Charlottetown Mutual Aid, a lot of times they might.
Gifts from the heart.
Yeah, right. They apply and they use the Rochford Square for whatever, for a clothing exchange. So they're not there to financially benefit, but there's still a fee for them to use Rochford Square. So
For trying to do
those would
good
be-
work at a
right.
volunteer means.
Yeah, so those are kind of examples
Yeah.
of different, different examples, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I don't say not-for-profit, they're just no-money organizations. But just on the unhoused, I have brought this up under your committee, Councillor McCabe, under Public Works. We do have land, the city does have surplus land, and I know Habitat for Humanity has reached out to us before to build housing for new families, for families that are struggling, and then they pay it back through monthly or yearly payments. But I think we should be also looking at our land inventory. And I did ask Scott at one of our meetings, and maybe he can go through our asset manager, who is Paul Johnston, to determine some of these pieces of property that we have around the city that we could use as a way of promoting co-op housing, Habitat for Humanity housing, something that could address the on-house situation. But I think if we could also, I'm going to direct that back to Councillor McCabe, and I'll bring it up again at the next meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Works, about where are we at with the amount of surplus land that we have that we could use as a way to promote housing for the unhoused.
Thank you, Your Worship. So are we in agreement to have staff come back to us at an appropriate time with additional information? Does that work?
Yay.
Okay. So any other discussion on that before we move on to a motion to adjourn? Okay. Is there such a thing as new business? Okay, is there any new business?
Neil. Motion to adjourn?
Okay, motion to adjourn. Thanks, everybody.